Okay, everybody, thanks for showing up today. This is the third of the six of the KBA's new series, What You Can Do With Your Law Degree. We're doing this for law students. Today's is family law. We're going to be focusing on, we have a couple of attorneys from the area that are heavily focused in family law. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jonathan Guess. I'm the membership coordinator and database admin here at the KBA, as well as the law student staff liaison. So we've got a couple of attorneys here. First, we have Deno Cole of McGehee, Cole, Gwindy, and Walling. Deno got his law degree from Deno. This is the first time I've ever heard of this. Your law school, Toro Law Center on Long Island.
It's only when they gave me a full scholarship. So
understandable. It's he was licensed in 1997, and then we also have Laura Wyrick of West Knox Law. Laura got her law degree from Valparaiso University, and she was licensed in 2013. So before we get going, I know there's a couple of students in here, so or maybe Dan. I think I met you last night, so waiting on the results next week. So good luck on that.
9 days.
If you guys have any questions about anything along the way, feel free to use the chat box. I'll be monitoring that. So throw anything in there that you guys that you want to pick their brains about. I've got plenty of questions here to throw at them as well. So let's see. So I guess first, Laura, we'll start with you. So I guess the first thing I want you guys to do is just kind of give us a general rundown of kind of where you were at when you finished law school, and then just kind of the path that's taken you to where you're at this point of your career.
Sure. So my law school is in Northwest Indiana. That's where I hail from. And like Deno, I went to the school that had the best scholarship. So sometimes those schools are obscure, but they did have a great basketball team. Sometimes they make it to the big dance. So usually if people have heard of Valparaiso, they know basketball. But I'm born and raised in Indiana, did my undergrad in business at Indiana University in Bloomington, did law school in Northwest Indiana, and I actually practiced for the first 5 years out in Northeast Indiana in a town called Fort Wayne. So Fort Wayne is about the midpoint between Detroit and Indianapolis. So it's just sort of that corner out there. It is cold, it is flat. And I was with a great firm out there. So what happened after I graduated law school is my first job was clerking for a trial court judge out there, which was fantastic. You see everything, you're learning all day, every day. And the judge that I worked for had a habit of whenever one of his magistrates, was on vacation or they just were short on coverage, he would swear me in as temporary judge and throw me up there as just out of law school on the domestic relations bench and say, you're judge now, you figure it out. And you learn real fast when it's you make ruling on evidentiary objections and, trying to make the decision. You figure it out, trial by fire for sure. And that's kind of where I figured out I liked the domestic relations stuff. Mm-hmm. I never thought that I would. I kind of made fun of it, like, oh, who wants all that baby mama drama? And then I found out I do. So I did that. That was a 1-year clerkship, which was really invaluable. And then I went to work at a firm that had about 25 lawyers there. And so I got to try a lot of different things. So I did a lot of civil stuff, some collections, big, just regular civil litigation. I did real estate. I did mergers and acquisitions, that kind of stuff. And I just always came back to domestic. That was the stuff that I wanted to do. I could read a bank loan document and I'd fall asleep at 1:30 in the afternoon at my desk. But if somebody calls me and wants to say, what that jerk did this time, like I'm all ears. So it's just been a fit for me. And so I worked for that firm for 5 years. And you guys probably know this, some states have reciprocity with your licensing. So if you're in good standing for 5 years, you can, waive in without having to take the exam. And Tennessee and Indiana have that reciprocity. So as soon as I had always loved Tennessee. And so as soon as I, hit my 5th anniversary, of having a license, I applied and got that application in. And it was a long process. It's pretty much just like applying for the bar. You just don't take a test. They want to know everything about you. But eventually that was approved. And then I got a job with a firm down here, which was a little bit of a surprise. And I'm married, and my husband had a great job up in Indiana too. And I just looked at him and I said, we can't live in Indiana forever. We have got to move. It is cold here. It is gray. Winter is forever. And life is too short. So I took the job down here with a firm called Sobieski, Messer and Elledge. I worked there for 2 years, at which point it was kind of the right time for me to just strike out on my own. And so in April of this year, I opened my own practice. It's just me right now. I'm hoping to grow eventually. But I've never really looked back. It's been, scary. All of a sudden you don't have a set paycheck. But it's been really worthwhile and really rewarding. So I'm only 6 months into the solo game, but I've been practicing about 8 years. And that's kind of the short story of how I got here.
Perfect. Yeah. Deno, what about you?
All right. Well, again, I went to a school in Long Island. I was a white Southern Christian male, and it was a Jewish law school. And so I think I was the diversity pick, and was lucky to leave law school with no student loans, which is probably not very common these days.
Mm-hmm.
And while in law school, I got to clerk. They had a clerk program with the Second Circuit Court of Appeals and also with the Eastern District of New York. So I got to see some federal cases, which was really cool. I did a summer abroad program in Russia, and I thought I wanted to do international law. And before law school, I took a year off between college and law school. I graduated college in 3 years, so I was kind of burned out on school and studying. And just to make sure I wanted to go to law school, I worked in a firm actually in Knoxville, and it was an older gentleman who started a prominent firm here in town, Butler, Vines and Babb. He was one of the founders of that firm. And so I liked it. I now have people that come to my office that are college students that will intern, and half of them love law, and the other half say, I'm never going to law school. So anyway, going back to law school, my first job offer was with a 1,000+ law firm in New York, and they wanted to move me to Moscow. And my father had some health issues back in Knoxville. I wasn't too keen on not seeing the sun for 4 months out of the year. And, although it was a very attractive salary, I came back to Knoxville and went back with Joe Yancey, who was, towards retirement. He actually never retired. He, like a lot of older lawyers, literally died in his chair practicing law. Great man. And he was an insurance defense and plaintiff attorney and did not do family law. And so to get me started, he said, well, I'm going to give you the cases that I'm not going to handle. And so he threw family law cases at me, and I had to teach myself family law. And so I went to some seminars and leaned on some older members of the bar, because they don't teach you how to practice law in law school. Unfortunately, there is some trial practice, but if you want to file a general sessions complaint, you're not going to learn that in law school. You'll know the concepts, and you're competent to make arguments and think like a lawyer, but you're not going to learn the practicality of what's the procedure for getting an injunction if somebody's abusing a child or something like that. So I had to learn by fire, and it was a great way to build my practice in other areas as well, because I don't just do family law, although that's a prominent part of my practice. People would get divorced, and they would have debt collectors come after them, or their spouse would default on the home, and there'd be a creditor suing them because of a deficiency balance. And so I got into bankruptcy law and did some bankruptcy law, and still do some bankruptcy law, and or they would have domestic violence issues. And so that was sort of my foothold into criminal defense practice. So it's a great way to also do other aspects of the law, because folks that go through divorce often need other legal services besides just a divorce or a custody or child support issue, or a parentage issue. I think, there's obviously a trend towards folks having children without the benefit of marriage. And so it's basically the same concept as a divorce custody issue. But anyway, it's a practice that once you get into it, you can get a reputation, and it's word of mouth. It can take off like wildfire. And I'm sure Laura being out 6 months, she'll probably have 3 associates before she knows it. I once had a 9-day divorce trial, or 11-day, I think it was 11-day divorce trial against Wanda Sobieski back.
Oh boy.
Boss. And those things shouldn't happen, but every single issue was litigated that could be litigated in a divorce.
Yeah.
And we had translators. Anyway, that's kind of a background of how I get into family law.
Great, yeah. So Deno, we'll just stick with you for now. What kinds of questions would you say would you want students to be asking, or people or folks who just graduated, if to help determine whether or not they would be wanting to pursue family law, I guess?
Well, I was talking years ago to one of the Court of Criminal Appeal judges, and he has a son who's an attorney in town. And he said he dissuaded him from practicing criminal law because there's a lot of stress in criminal defense law with regard to, clients potentially innocent clients potentially going away and having the anxiety and the stress of that. And he forbid him from practicing family law because of the stressor. So you have to have the right fortitude if you're going to get into this field, because you end up not just being an attorney, but a counselor, which we're not licensed to be counselors. But I think it's rewarding because people are at their absolute worst when they're going through a divorce, when they come into your office. And you have to be prepared for folks that may be a doctor, or I've represented several lawyers in their divorce. And, the lawyers are tough because they think they know everything, especially the ones who've never practiced divorce law. So you have to have a good way with people, because, you're not representing corporations, you're representing individuals. And when people come in with a custody dispute, it's the most, sometimes they treat it like their most prized possession. So you have to be patient and calm, and you have to know how to deal with people who can be very irrational at times. So it's not for everybody. That it can be a challenge to deal with that. And you learn how to do that just with practice. I've got several attorney friends that would never do family law for that very reason. So you just have to, I guess, try it out, make sure that you have the right fortitude. But
Sure. What about you, Laura?
Yeah, I echo that completely. It's all about the personal relationship with your client, and sort of being that, you could be the best litigator, and we have some really talented litigators in town here, but if you don't have the bedside manner, your client's not going to feel great about the process, because it's their personal life. So that's a constant sort of learning practice of I'm not a therapist, but how can I make sure you feel like this is going the way, in the direction that you want, and that you're being advocated for. So it's taxing, and you have to have good boundaries with people. Everybody wants to text nowadays, but you gotta take time for yourself, or you will lose your mind. So there has to be a way to turn it off and put it away, while also still balancing sort of the customer service side of it. So
Good thing, yeah. Kind of speaking to that, we'll stick on that topic for now. So the work-life balance thing, what tips or strategies would you have, Laura, we'll stick with you, would you
Sure.
have for students in those early in their careers to help to start preparing now to help mitigate those things when they get further into their careers?
Yeah. You have to find what works for you. I mean, so part of it will be if you're out on your own, you have a whole lot more flexibility of like how you structure your day and your time off and your boundaries. If you work for a firm, you're probably going to have an hours quota or some sort of financial quota that you're going to have to meet. And so you got to find out what works for you to meet your expectations and also keep your sanity. I do things different than a lot of other people. I know people that work all night. And so they kind of get their work done, at 2 a.m. when they're in the zone and no one can call them. I can't do that. I'm an 8 to 6 person. And then my brain starts, it's bedtime. So I just go 100 miles an hour, from 8 to 6. And then try to really keep it separate from the weekends, try to take vacations. But then again, if you're on your own, and you're running, sort of your own shop, then there's a little bit more pressure to take those phone calls. You really can't turn it off. You gotta keep the business coming because it's all on you. So it's a little bit harder to try to shut it off and take a vacation. I just took, 4 days and went to Vegas for a family trip a couple weeks ago, but I still had, my business phone on. Is that going to be good for me long term? We'll find out. But it's just constantly, I think, knowing yourself and checking in with what works for you. Some people are workaholics and they want to work 7 days a week, and that does it for them. Most people aren't. So find the balance. Don't give out your cell phone number to clients. Find a way to get your company cell phone app on your phone so you can turn it off when you need to, but still access it when you need to remotely.
Yeah, good tips there. Deno, what about you?
Yeah, very few clients get my cell phone. Occasionally I have personal relationships with folks that become my client and they end up with my cell phone because you can't call the judge at 10 o'clock at night if there's an emergency, and clients don't realize that at times. We do try to use technology to maximize our free time. I know that when I take vacations, I bring my computer with me, which, some lawyers say not to do, but it's just such a evolving practice that clients want instant answers because we live in that society that you have to have an email answered in the same day. And I do the best to keep clients happy by responding as soon as possible. We sort of have a 24-hour rule in that respect, and can't always happen if you're in trial for several days. You're getting ready for the trial the next day while you're trying to respond to emails at night. You just have to set your schedule. I try to set phone calls with clients instead of just taking calls all the time, because resetting and trying to keep going is hard to do. You have to stay organized. Early in my career, I worked a lot more. I worked harder, but not smarter. So scheduling phone calls, scheduling appointments, and staying on top of your billing is also important, because I tend to get focused on client service and well, this client hasn't paid me for 6 months. And you can't keep working for free. You have to be careful that clients don't take advantage of you in that respect. But you have to take your vacations, and you have to reset sometimes. But I don't know that I ever take a full vacation because I always take my computer with me.
The emails just pile up. It just makes sense to just stay on top, do a little bit every day, so you don't come back to like 300 emails and you want to die.
Tough. Okay, so given all of that, why, Deno, we'll stick with you. So why is family law important to you, and how did that play into you choosing it as an area to focus on?
Well, it's kind of funny that I was going to do, international tax law or international whatever law, and you're going to represent these mega corporations, and you'd be carrying the bag of a junior partner for 3 years before you'd ever see the inside of a courtroom. Doing family law, you get trial experience immediately, and you get to actually be a lawyer, be a trial lawyer. And there's also the reward of helping a person. You actually, once they get through the divorce, a lot of them are very grateful. I've had clients give me gifts, and clients see me out at a restaurant and send me a bottle of wine. It's very, humbling when you're able to help somebody in that respect. But it's also a way to build a practice fast, because you can get retainer fees in right away and start paying your overhead and maintaining your practice in a way that you don't have to worry about paying your bills. So it's not all about trying to be lucrative. It's also rewarding to help these folks and see what your work actually goes towards.
Sure, yeah. Laura, what about you?
Well, Deno alluded to it earlier. You see people generally on one of the worst days of their life when they come in to talk to you for the first time. I mean, somebody who's just found out their marriage is ending, or their relationship is ending, and they're not going to have the access to the kid that they used to have, or whatever, or they've just been physically abused by a partner and need to get an order of protection. It generally, you start with people at the absolute one of the worst days of their life, and it is so cool to see them 4 months later, when it's all done, and they walk in and to sign their final paperwork or pick up their final copies, and they look like a totally different person. They're together, like for example, for women, they come in, they're crying, they're a mess, everything. And then on that last day, they come in and they just have this glow, and, they just look great. And you're just like, yes, I knew we could get here. And so that's a great part about doing family law. The other part about family law is a little more practical. There is almost, it is rare to have heavy lifting brief writing unless you're doing appellate work. A lot of family law is some pretty simple motion practice. And so you're not going to necessarily be living inside Westlaw or LexisNexis and drafting these very complex motions for summary judgment and all of that. I found for myself that, while, that is, the essence of legal work is the research and the writing, it just doesn't get me out of bed in the morning. Coming in and talking to people all day, which is generally what I do, and helping them navigate their problems. That's a lot more fun to me than sitting alone, staring, right at a screen for 8 hours, trying to find that case, that solves it, So I like that there's limited heavy briefing.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun when it comes up, but like small doses is just right for me.
Yeah, great. Okay, so Laura, we'll stick with you. So what steps, classes, or experiences would you feel best prepare a future family law attorney?
Like in the law school setting?
Either law school, early in their careers, either classes they can take, things they can do while they're in school, or early in their career, stuff like that.
I would do some shadowing, some externing, follow people around, make sure, if you can get a paid gig, great. Or you could even, go down to Judge McMillan's courtroom on a Thursday morning, which is order of protection day, which in Fourth Circuit Court right there in the City County building. And they're pretty well back open to the public. The COVID stuff's kind of lifted. You could sit in the gallery and just watch 4 hours of court. And in most courts, you can do that. But I know for certain you would have something to see on Thursday mornings down there. You can watch them do that. I don't know if your law school has clinics where you can get into some practice type stuff under supervision of somebody else's license your third year. Early in practice, you can always start taking appointments down at juvenile court, where the court will appoint you, and you will learn quick how that system works. It's really important to make relationships with the Department of Children's Services attorneys and their caseworkers. So you kind of know who you're dealing with. So if you get down the road and you have a private paying client, you've kind of already paved the way. They know who you are. They know what to expect with you. They know your stuff. And relationships with the magistrates down there. And it's a little less formal down at juvenile court. So you're not necessarily always going to get hit with the same level of, evidentiary objections, trial experience, stuff like that you would get downtown. But it is kind of a nice way to start since it's a little less formal from the get-go.
Sure. Yeah. Deno, what about you?
I agree with a lot of what Laura said. Also, if you can find a mentor. Again, some of the practical ways of filing motions, you're not going to know unless someone tells you how to do it. I think that if you could clerk while you're in law school for a family law firm, that would be an excellent way. And potentially that could work itself into being a full-time job after law school. And then if you work for somebody, obviously they're going to train you on how to practice law in the practical setting. There are obviously domestic relations classes in law school that will give you the good nuts and bolts, and you'll see what a marital dissolution agreement looks like. Another thing is there are really good practice manuals out there that you can buy that have forms. And if you have access to, Lexis or Westlaw, there's also forms in there, but there's some that are specific towards Tennessee law, which you obviously want to, if you're going to practice in Tennessee, of course, you're going to want to get those practice manuals.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and plug a resource that the KBA has. Is we actually have I'm not exactly sure where it is on our website, but we have a kind of a library of forms that Tennessee attorneys need for certain things. So if you, again, I don't know where that is on our website. It's somewhere. I think it's in the member resources, but that's great advice. So okay, so you were kind of, we'll stick with you. So we were kind of speaking about the mentorships and how important they are. So students are always encouraged, obviously, to seek out mentorships, as you just did as well. What kinds of things were you looking for in your current mentors, and what steps did you take to help foster those relationships?
Well, obviously, probably one of the first things I did was find somebody that appeared to be competent, and you just become friends with them, and they'll want to help you, and you offer to help them too for free. I know that there was a lady who was just a few years older than me that had worked for a prominent divorce firm in town. And I was friends with her boyfriend, who happened to be an attorney as well. And I said, hey, if you have any cases where I need to fill in for you, let me know. So I would appear for motions or settings that didn't require a lot of heavy lifting. And so then she was that much more willing to actually help me, because I offered my services for free in kind of exchange for her mentoring me. And I'm always happy to help younger lawyers, because I think it's a disservice to the public if there's an attorney out there in the wind not knowing what to do. I'd rather have even an adversary that knows what they're doing, because they can make a case more difficult to settle if they think they know something and they actually aren't properly trained.
Right. Laura, what about you?
Yeah, you kind of got to let mentorships happen naturally. And you'll find that, I mean, people, if you work in a firm, there'll be a partner or somebody you can kind of gravitate towards. You have something in common and just somebody you can lean on. But yeah, other than that, it's generally underlies some kind of friendship, like Deno said. And then I have found just other attorneys that, like, sometimes you have on the other side of a case, or somebody who maybe mediates a case for you. You kind of get you can build some rapport with them, while a case is going on, and then you sort of feel comfortable reaching out to them if you've got a question or something. And then if they're open to sort of being that resource for you, it just kind of snowballs.
Sure, yeah. Okay,
I
Laura.
might add one. Can I add one real quick thing?
Sure, yeah.
If you want to get a lot of a crash course in family law, if you get trained as a mediator or family law mediator, they actually go through all the law, all family law in a real quick set, and you get a bunch of forms in that process. Now, you might not get hired as a mediator when you're fresh out of law school, but you'll at least have that designation for later on once you build a reputation.
Sure. Okay, so Deno, we'll stick with you. What you kind of both spoke to this a bit, but what are the best ways to find job opportunities in family law, and what qualities do those employers look for?
Obviously, people want to hire people they like, and that aren't lazy, that appear to be eager beavers. And you want to work for lawyers that have good reputations. And that's not very hard to figure out these days. You can figure it out just even with Google searches, their ratings online, and you can certainly just ask around and say, what about this firm? The Knoxville bar in general is very collegial. We're very lucky to be in the bar. Laura called me up. I would take her at her word, and I'm sure she would do the same for me. And it makes it a very pleasant place to practice. There are some bad apples, just like there are in every field. And just by asking around and getting to know people, you can figure out who those people are pretty quickly.
Sure, yeah. Laura, what about you?
I don't know if I've got really anything to add on that.
Qualities that they're looking for. Okay.
Well, I mean, you definitely want to be a self-starter, because a lot of times, you may get hired by a firm that just says, okay, here's your caseload, figure it out, and so you've got to get in there. You got to figure out what you need to know. You've got to get a hold of the case. You've got to manage everything. And so most partners are really too busy to train, and they do the best that they can. But if they know, oh, I handed this stack of files to Shelby, I know she's not going to drop the ball on them. Like, I can trust her. I'm not going to get a call saying she missed a hearing. She's on it. She's filing what she needs to do. Those things are just difficult to demonstrate before you get hired. It's a talking point for an interview, and just say, look, you can count on me. I got it. But they'll see you once you're in action, and hopefully reward you for it.
Yeah, sure thing. So I want to speak kind of towards your just general law school experience. So, and Dan, I know you're awaiting your bar results, so this may not apply to you as much, but so Laura, we'll stick with you. So did you juggle classes while working as an intern before finishing law school? And if so, can you describe that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. I worked part-time for an attorney. And then I also did an externship in a corporate legal department. It's hard. I would not recommend, doing it your first year for sure. But you've got to balance it, because you can't come out of law school with a resume that just says GPA 4.0. You've got to fill all that out. So again, you just kind of got to know yourself and know, because grades are still important. I did moot court. I found that, out of school, they put this big emphasis on moot court or law review and those kinds of things. But just be careful to balance it, to make sure your grades are still up there, and then you've got other things to fill it out.
Sure. Deno, what about you?
I think most law schools prohibit working as a 1L. I know some people sneak and actually still get a little work in. I actually worked crazy hours as a law clerk my last year of law school, and I did a little bit my second year. I learned a lot, and I got paid what I thought was pretty good money, because it was up in New York, and so there's a different scale up there. And actually, as a 3L, which they have the same program in Tennessee, you can actually go into court. So I got to argue cases with my less Southern accent than it is now. I dropped it because I got tired of people making fun of it when I was in New York. But if you can work for a law firm, you can go through that and actually argue cases and argue motions. It's invaluable experience.
Sure.
And then
So
put that on the resume. Like, hey, I've actually been to court,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's see. So speaking towards kind of practicing within family law, how do you deal with maybe some of the darker circumstances of family law and just in general, kind of how do you kind of deal with that on a day-to-day basis? And Laura, we'll go with you.
Yeah, we deal with some messed up stuff sometimes, especially if you do any kind of juvenile court work. You've got to be prepared to hear about people doing some pretty horrible things to children who rely on their caregivers to take care of them, and they hurt them. You've just got to, I don't know if there is any trick to it. burnout is real, empathy burnout is real. If you find yourself being too callous, it's time for a vacation. Because, and I sometimes tell my clients this, like, look, if it seems like I'm being too transactional about this, please tell me to slow down, and kind of walk it through, because we see so much, so much of this every day, so much pain, people going through, again, the worst days of their lives, their marriage is ending, and you're like, okay, well, here's the contracts, I'm here, and you gotta pull it back and make sure you can be there for them, because in this kind of work, it requires it. So it kind of ties in with the work-life balance. That's the only tip I have there.
Sure thing. Deno, what about you?
You kind of become nose blind, and you get, I don't want to say jaded, but when you do see the worst of the worst, child abuse, child sexual abuse, which is probably the absolute worst thing you can see. And then you have a client that comes in and says, my husband cheated on me, and has a meltdown. And you're comparing that to having to deal with a kid that just had his or her life ruined over sexual abuse. You have to put it in perspective. It's like, well, this person obviously hasn't had that kind of level of abuse. And to them, that is the most important thing in their life right now, is they lost trust in somebody that was their whole life that just cheated on them. So you have to remind yourself that you have to show empathy when you can, and vacation, like Laura said, is a good way to do that. You just have to slow down and sometimes put yourself in their shoes to make sure you continue to have that empathy. Otherwise, like Laura said, it is just transactional. And, once you tell a client about how the procedure works, you sometimes become like a robot, and you have to remember that these are people over there, and they're here. They don't know what an MDA is, or temporary injunction, and how all that works. And so you just have to be patient.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, besides the darker stuff, let's focus on the kind of the brighter stuff. So you kind of both spoke to this maybe a little bit, but what is just in general, the most rewarding part of your law practice? Deno, we'll go with you.
Yeah, I probably said it before. When the client, sees you on the street and says they had a great experience, or that same client that you helped out that came in, that was a complete stress ball, and then their life has, gotten better. And best of all, when they refer other clients, that's probably one of the greatest rewards that an attorney can get. Probably one of my more favorite cases recently. I beat this guy. I represented a wife in a divorce with kids, and I beat him up pretty good in depositions. I think he almost came across the table and to take a swing at me. He was pretty rough guy. And then we went to trial, and I kind of beat him up again in trial, and got a good result for my client. And then about a year or two later, he called me, and he wanted to hire me because he thought that I did such a good job against his wife. It was so, that to me is very rewarding. And I'm not a pound the podium, yell at people kind of guy. I think my questions just got under his skin. I'm more of a even keel, just the facts kind of person. And so, to get under that guy's skin and have him come hire me, that was a great reward.
Sure thing. Laura, what about you?
Oh, winning a trial. I mean, of course, like, everything Deno said about people being appreciative, number one, love to do a good job for the client, love to see that. But there is no better feeling than working your butt off for months and preparing and having mounds of paper and going into court and knowing everything backwards and forwards and just nailing it. You have to live for that moment if you're going to do any kind of litigation, because it's the prep is not fun, but when you get that order and you just slam dunked it, there's no better feeling than that. And I don't know if this is necessarily rewarding, but what's great about the practice of law, even when I've been in firms or, out on my own, is the amount of flexibility that you have with just scheduling your life and your personal time. It's unlike, any other position where they just kind of expect you to be in the chair 8 to 5. You always have your phone, you're answering emails, but if you got to go take your kids or go to the doctor's appointment or, whatever you need to do, you can generally work it out. And as long as your partners know that you're getting your work done, most people don't have a problem with you doing it on your schedule, which is really, really nice.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So I kind of want to speak about practicing in Knoxville. So you guys are both versed in practicing in multiple different areas, which is kind of rare for these discussions from my experience so far, talking to the attorneys around town. But since we have two transplants here, essentially, can you speak to kind of compare practicing law in Knoxville to the other places that you've practiced, and why Knoxville is the place that you ended up wanting to practice long term? Deno, we'll go with you.
Okay, well, I had other choices too. I went to college at a place called the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, and that was always sort of a second home to me because I grew up there
Love
a
Charleston.
little bit. And I had some friends who were attorneys down there, and so I looked at that area, and I took the South Carolina bar, and I took the New York bar, and I took the Tennessee bar. So I had three choices. I took the Tennessee and the New York bar in the same week. Which was kind of
You're insane.
And I flew from New York to Knoxville. Took the New York bar, took the multi-state on Wednesday, and then the Tennessee bar on Thursday. That's how it was set up back then. And then I took the South Carolina bar 6 months later.
Oh my God.
But anyway, it was too expensive to maintain those licenses, so I actually never got my South Carolina license because you had to go through 5 years of a whole series of sitting in court trials to practical experience before they give you the license. But Knoxville is probably the greatest bar in Tennessee. There are other cities, I won't mention them, you'd be surprised, but there's one city in particular where the lawyers are like sharks, and they use the local rules as swords and not shields. They don't want to work with you. They'll notice you to depositions and to hearings without checking with your schedule first, which means that you have to ask the court to change those dates when lawyers play games like that. Knoxville lawyers, aside from a few bad apples, are not like that. If you have a personal issue that comes up, or you have other cases that get in the way, they'll work with you on getting things scheduled. Sorry about that. And so anyway, if you do stay in Knoxville, you'll be lucky in that regard. And there was another part of the question I probably missed.
No, you nailed it. That was like what we were looking for. Laura, what about you?
So I practiced for 5 years up in Indiana. And the family law bar there, it's a comparable size community to Knoxville, but there seemed to be fewer attorneys that did family law, and I did not find that they were, on the whole, of the same caliber as Knoxville. Like I feel like there are a lot more attorneys that do Knoxville, or a lot more attorneys in Knoxville that do family law, or at least supplement their practice with it. And so we have a larger community based on what I was used, compared to what I was used to. And they all, seem to know their stuff and be on top of it, which is really great. I mean, we've got a talented pool of trial attorneys that do family law, which, raises the quality of representation, in the community across the board. So that's what I've found. I don't have a ton of experience going to, other counties in Tennessee. So I would defer to Deno's experience there, but my experience in Knox County specifically has just been fantastic so far.
Yeah, that's pretty much what you both said was kind of a combined answer for what most attorneys in the area would tell you. So it's good to hear that. So okay, so kind of the poignant thing right now, many students are having a hard time finding internships as the pandemic is kind of affecting the hiring process. Do you have any advice for a student or someone earlier in their career who are on how to handle a gap in their resume? Laura, what about you? We'll start with you.
if research and writing is your thing, try to publish something. There are, legal publications that are always looking for submissions. And so
Yeah.
that's a good resume builder if you can add that to your publications line, if you've got some free time. But yeah, it sounds like it's tough out there. And if you got to pay the bills, then you take appointed work. You go down to juvenile court. You talk to those court case managers down there. They'll get you appointments. Judge McMillan appoints people for criminal contempts when people violate orders of protection. That's another source of some appointed work. Those would be my suggestions.
Sure. Yeah. Deno, what about you?
But you can also volunteer with legal aid and take order protection cases on behalf of petitioners. If you're still a student, you can seek out attorneys to work for, and it's sometimes hard to find a paying position, but sometimes you can ask to do a volunteer position and get your foot in the door, and at least you can say, hey, I work for this firm, or I did work for this firm, and you at least have a referral source. If you can self-publish that, like Laura said, that is very good, especially if you're a student. But I know that DICTA, which is the Knoxville Bar Association, I'll put a plug in for DICTA, is always looking for submissions, and it doesn't have to be a law review quality submission. It can be just a 500,000 word, 500 word type article that covers a certain area of law.
Sure. Yeah. We got about maybe 10 minutes left. I don't want to take up too much more time than that, but Shelby, Dan, if you guys have any questions specifically that you would want to throw at these guys while we got them here, feel free to throw it in the chat right now, and I'll try to address it before we get up. But okay, so let's see, just kind of in general, Deno, we'll just stick with you for what steps could students take, or what advice would you have for students to just in general help boost their confidence about practicing law?
We'll take trial practice because that's a free way to get up and argue. If you can do a 3L where you can practice under a licensed attorney and make arguments, that'll boost your confidence. I mean, I one of the areas of law I do is actually federal criminal defense, and I'll just go back and agree with Laura that winning a jury trial is especially rewarding. And the trick to winning any kind of case is preparation. I mean, you just have to, so if you can outwork the other attorney, sometimes even if the facts might not be on your side, if you know your case better than the other side, you may win regardless of the fact that law and facts might not be on your side. But anyway, I'm sure Laura has a good answer to this one as well.
I got distracted from what the question was. Oh, well, anything you can do to help boost your confidence. Okay. Well, this is a piece of advice I give every law student, and it's not necessarily for your confidence. It's more of a practical thing. If you don't know how to play golf now and you have downtime, take some lessons, because once you start working, you will never learn. You will not have time. And you could end up at a firm with guys that want to go out and play, and if you don't know how to play and you're just driving the cart, you get kind of excluded. So if you got time and any interest in it, learn how to play golf, because I didn't and I regret it. But in terms of boosting your confidence, you're just going to be shaking in your boots the first, 10, 20, 30, 40 times you appear in court. You just got to get over it. You just got to do it, and then you'll love it.
Sure. All right. Dan has a question here. So his research has indicated that about 3,500 divorces per year in Knox County and the 8 surrounding counties. Is that accurate? And how many cases do you handle per year? Laura, we'll go with you.
How many cases a year? I have no clue about how many cases I handle a year. Deno, do you have any idea?
I usually have around 200 cases that are opened.
Yeah, I know what's kind of open at any given time, but in terms of like closeouts in a year, I don't know.
And I don't know about the number of divorces, 3,500. That I will say that the last time I checked, Tennessee had the #1 divorce rate in the country.
Wow.
All right.
And some of the research, I read another article, it was kind of interesting that it was that there was a trend in states that had a higher percentage of Catholics had a lower divorce rate. So in the Northeast, they actually have a lower divorce rate than they do in the South, which has a lower percentage of Catholics living in the
Guilt.
state. I think North Carolina has the least amount of Catholics per capita, or used to, and Tennessee has like the second least amount of Catholics per capita. But then you also have some roadblocks in other states where you have 1 year waiting periods, whereas in Tennessee it's 60 days if you don't have kids and 90 days if you do have kids. They changed that law a couple years. If you agreed to grounds, you could get divorced in the same day that you filed your divorce in Tennessee. They changed that. I guess they didn't like that, but.
That's funny. This is silly, but I was watching The Departed last week, and one of the lines was something like, I'm Irish Catholic, I'll deal with the problem until it kills me, or something. So what I'm hearing is if you want to practice permanently divorces, don't live amongst Catholics, because you may not get many cases. Okay, so Shelby asked, what is something that you wish you knew as a law student? Deno, we'll go with you first.
Oh, what's something I wish I knew? What I guess I didn't know and learn is to be a successful law student, I had to maintain a certain GPA to keep my scholarship. So I was on pins and needles, and I made friends fast with students that were in upper level classes that had done really well, and they would share their outlines with me. And, everybody learns differently, but I just asked their advice. How did you make A's in this class? And sometimes it's working smarter, not harder. But as a law student wanting to get out into the transition into practice, you want to start soon. You don't want to start looking for a job the day you get out of law school. You want to try to build some sort of relationships before you get out, but that can be hard because, what if you're going to law school here in Knoxville, but you want to move back to where you live in, I don't know, Memphis or even another state. So I actually kept those relationships in South Carolina and in Tennessee and in New York, because I didn't know where I was going to end up. So try to maintain relationships with somebody that hopefully can generate into a job, or at least somebody who could let you hang a shingle with them.
Sure. Laura, what about you?
Probably would have used office hours more. I almost never went to go see professors, and I made it out with fine grades, but they probably could have been better if I had used that resource. And then those are also people like if you're going to school in Knoxville and you're going to be in the Knoxville area, those are good just from a relationship perspective to be good people to know. And you may need recommendation letters and things like that. So maybe cultivate some more relationships with the professors.
Sure, yeah. Dan, I think I can see you typing. You just want to ask your question. I feel like it would be easier.
Yeah, as fast as I type, it's much easier. I was typing that. I know it's pretty sensitive, and I can't really get a good answer from anybody that I've asked, and I've asked a lot of people. But for a brand new graduate starting family law on their own, new practice, what do you think is a good range of earnings for the first couple of years?
It depends, I think, on your marketing plan. Do you have money to invest in Google Ads and a website, because you're going to be building a book of business? Like, are you talking about starting your own place, or?
Yeah, just opening my own practice.
Yeah, I think
I actually did my business plan for law office management was for family law. And that's where I came up with that number, because the national average is 14.9 per thousand for divorce rate. For the Knoxville area, it's 3.5 per thousand. And that there's about 1 million people in the 9 counties, including Knox County, and that's about 3,500 a year. So I was thinking if I could get about 2 to 3.5% of that at $1,500 to $2,500 per case, 100 of those per year is a pretty decent living. And that's what I base that on. But I can't really get a good handle on, is that accurate? Are there 3,500 divorces in Knox County and the surrounding counties? And if there are, are there so many divorce lawyers that you might be lucky to get 1 or 2% of that number, or can you easily get 3%?
So I think the clerk's office in each of these counties could tell you exactly how many they have filed each year. But in my experience, I'm not sure you can boil it down to just the math and assume that you get a certain percentage of the cases. I would direct you to research a little more how Google algorithm works, search engine optimization, because if people can click on your website and they like what they see and they call you, you can rein them in from there, and you could get a huge percentage of all of those, or a smaller percentage depending on how effective your campaign is.
Yeah, I would just say, Dan, I wouldn't necessarily focus on the percentages. You can just cast the net. If you really were wanting to get those numbers, the AOC might even have some of those statistics as well. The Administrative Office of the Courts, that's what that stands for. But once you actually start reining in, like Laura said, clients from perhaps a website or services like Avo, and there's other services out there that some people use, then it's going to be mostly word of mouth. And that's how when I get calls from family members from other states that have suggestions for attorneys, if I don't know an attorney in that area, I typically say, well, talk to somebody who's had a good experience. And so if you do good work and you develop a good reputation, then you're going to have word of mouth that's going to bring in more clients than a fancy website or those Avo services or anything like that. And also develop relationships with other attorneys that don't do family law. I get quite a bit of referrals from, personal injury firms or criminal defense firms, and it just will blossom from there. Try not to be neglectful of your clients, because then you could lose a referral if you do a bad job, and that they might quit referring you cases. That's just kind of common sense. Trying to think of another way to get cases would be to join civic organizations. I do some volunteer work, and I've gotten a tremendous amount of work from just doing that over the years.
I'll add a shameless plug for the KBA. Dan, this may be something you want to look into. Quote, fingers crossed for the bar results next week, but our LRIS service is great. I'm not the main answerer of the phone, but I'd say I personally probably transfer 2 or 3 a day over to Tracy. So she's the LRIS coordinator and we have tons and tons. Most of the call, I don't know what the percentages are. She'd have a better handle on that, but a lot of the LRIS service is dealing with family law. So so I'd say to look into.
I do that, and I've actually got a referral sitting in my inbox that I have to follow up on. So, and to Deno's comment about making friends with non-family law attorneys, a good way to do that is to join the barristers. And that's a good mix of different practice areas. You meet people who are, younger in practice, and do some cool events and volunteer work as well. So.
There's no steps you have to take. If you get your bar results in and you pass, I'll convert you to an attorney member. You'll automatically be put into the barrister, so you'll be getting all those notices and stuff. So good advice all around there, I think. But that is all the time we have. I think we've gone over a little bit. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to also put these discussions on YouTube. So if you want to revisit anything, feel free. If you want Laura or Deno's contact info, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy, assuming that you guys are okay with that, to give it to you. We'll hopefully start building some of those mentorships. But Deno and Laura, thank you so much for doing this. We greatly appreciate it. Dan and Shelby, thank you for joining us and participating. It's been great. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. And then thanks again for joining us.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all.